God's company in times of adversity. Genesis chapter 39 verses 1 to 23. Isaiah chapter 52 verse 3 to chapter 53 verse 12. And Acts chapter 16 verses 16 to 40. Introduction. How will you differentiate the company of your friends and God's company during adversity? Last week, Judah left his brothers to visit a friend. From there he saw a Canaanite woman, and he married her and they had 3 sons. He took a wife for his firstborn and her name was Tamar. Died because of wickedness, so Judah told his second son Onan to raise up an heir for his brother. But Onan didn't follow the instruction of his father, so Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh killed him. Then Judah told Tamar that he will partner her to his third son Shelah once he is grown. But Judah didn't keep his word, so Tamar made a move. She veiled herself and went to an open place where Judah saw her and thought she's a harlot, and he went into her. Tamar bore twins Perez and Zerah, and from Perez, the promised seed will come. Our Torah portion is back to the story of Joseph. Now he had been taken down to Egypt by the Ishmaelites, and Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, bought him. This time, he was far from home and his family, a sojourner, not knowing his fate. But in times of this adversity, Adonai was with Joseph, and the result was 1. Joseph was successful verses 2 to 3. In spite of being away with his family, Joseph has Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and it's the reason why he succeeded. Adonai placed Joseph inside the house of a very influential man, Potiphar. He also observed the success of Joseph due to the company of Adonai. 2. Joseph found favor in the eyes of Potiphar verses 4 to 5. Even though Joseph was a slave, he became the most trusted man inside the house of Potiphar. He gave Joseph authority and made him his overseer. Because of this, Adonai blessed the house of Potiphar and even his field for the sake of Joseph. 3. Joseph overcame temptation verses 7 to 18. Joseph was attractive because of his good looks and form, and this caused the wife of Potiphar to seduce him. The question is, how did Joseph overcome the temptation of his master's wife? First, he refused. In James chapter 4 verse 17 it says, "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." The Greek word for resist is anthistemi, which means to stand against, that is, oppose. Let us always remember that it is usual for temptation to return. In verse 10, the wife of Potiphar keeps on tempting Joseph day by day, but Joseph keeps on resisting as well. Second, Joseph fled and ran. Sometimes, temptation comes when you are alone. Like Joseph, when he went into the house of his master to do his work, the wife of Potiphar caught him by his garment and forced him to lie with her. To flee and ran away from temptation means we know it is the plan of the devil, so we go the other way. Joseph fled and ran not inside the house of his master, but outside of it to overcome temptation. 4. Joseph found favor inside the prison verses 20 to 23. Again, the company of Adonai was with Joseph. Like what Potiphar did to Joseph when he was still inside his house, the warden of the prison trusted him and committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners inside. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. Whatever Joseph did, Adonai made it prosper. Our Torah portion is a reminder to us that even if we are doing good things, we are not exempted in facing adversity. A good friend said, "Adversity is the mother of opportunity." Our Haftarah portion is part of the 4 servant songs that starts in chapter 42 verses 1 to 4. Then the second is from chapter 49 verses 1 to 6. The third is from chapter 50 verses 4 to 9. And the fourth is from chapter 52 verses 13 to chapter 53 verse 12. The view of the Bible scholars regarding the suffering servant is divided. Some say the servant is Israel, while others say it's Yeshua. With these 2 views, I agree with the latter. In Mark chapter 10 verse 45 it says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life a ransom for many." How could he give himself as a ransom? He must suffer. In chapter 53 of our Haftarah portion, we can see his sufferings. 1. He was despised and rejected by men. Verse 3. Yeshua felt and experienced the rejection of his fellow Jews in Matthew chapter 13 verse 57. But he said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country and in his own house. 2. He was wounded and bruised. Verse 5. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 24. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. 3. He was oppressed, afflicted, and led as lamb to the slaughter. Verse 7. 1 Peter chapter 2 verses 21 to 22. For to this you were called, because Yeshua also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. Beyond doubt, only Messiah Yeshua can fit with this. In apostolic, there was this slave girl that Paul and Silas met. She was possessed by the evil spirit, with the masters who were involved in fortune-telling. This possessed girl keeps on following Paul and his company and publicly announcing about their ministry. It came to a point that in the name of Yeshua, Paul rebuked the possessed girl, and she was freed from the evil spirit. Because of what happened, Paul and Silas were imprisoned. In spite of doing their task as followers of Yeshua, they were treated wrongly. Instead of losing hope and faith, they did two positive things. 1. They worshipped Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Verse 25. Paul and Silas didn't take their situation as negative. But they saw the positive side of it. They knew that Adonai allowed it to happen so they could proclaim the way of salvation. Romans chapter 8 verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. 2. They didn't escape the prison after the earthquake. Verses 26 to 29. Paul and Silas knew that the reason for the earthquake was not for their freedom, but for the freedom of the warden and prisoners to be freed from their sins. They shared Yeshua as the only way of salvation. Romans chapter 10 verse 9. That if you confess in your mouth the Lord Yeshua and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The connection of our parasha is about suffering in doing the right thing. In Torah, Joseph, being faithful to his master, refused to lie with the wife of Potiphar, but was sent to prison. In Haftarah, Yeshua the suffering servant was despised, rejected, wounded, and bruised for our transgressions and iniquities. In apostolic, Paul and Silas were imprisoned after rebuking the possessed girl. Back to my introduction. The company of true friends can help us in times of adversity. But the company of Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is more helpful because he is bigger than our trials. Hebrews 13:6. The Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? Shabbat Shalom.